And if it got to the point of which what we've seen now, which is why he was designated for assignment, and if Mitch Moreland was playing well, and he has, and he's a good glove at first base, we can just put him there and we can, you know what, we'll eat the money, we'll do what we have to do, but in the long run, at least in their eyes, maybe it'll help. Because in my opinion, Hanley Ramirez, the only way the option's going to get kicked in, from what I read, is if he is traded. Once he is released, the vesting option is voided. And then all he's going to get paid is the league minimum, and that's it.
Right. And that's good news. And I wasn't aware that was the exact scenario until he was already designated. But another thing that was confusing to me was, being under the impression that they would slow his pace down. It really stunned me that Cora came out in January or February, whenever it was, and said, Hanley Ramirez is going to be our number 3 starter. And I was like, oh my goodness. Because that just told me what that told me was they don't care about the vesting option. They're going to start him, and he's going to be in the lineup just about every day. Because what team in MLB has a part-time number 3 hitter?
I can't think of one.
Yeah, exactly. So I was horrified with that, but that just kind of really threw me. And I don't like Hanley in the middle of the order. Like, if they dropped him down to like 6, 7, or 8, not that was ever realistic, but say you put him in the 7 hole, then I'm a lot more fine with it, because whatever you get out of him, if he's a 2080 player or a 3100 player, that becomes a huge bonus if you're getting that out of your 7 hole. And that's fine, but I don't want him being the guy in the 3 or 4 hole who has to drive in Mookie and Benintendi when he's probably not going to be all that clutch for you. And I got a lot of problems with Mookie in the leadoff spot, as my Twitter followers and anyone who listens to this podcast will tell you. I would much rather just have a conventional 3 and 4 tandem with him and JD, but so the lineup's been kind of goofy as far as I'm concerned, and the fact that Cora was going to put Hanley at number 3 just kind of surprised me. And another thing too, the decision got made at 11:45 a.m. in Tampa on Thursday. And then Hanley had just gone 0 for 4 the night before, grounded into 2 double plays, one of which was when the bases were loaded. And me and Dave were texting, about how bad he was. And little did we know the conversation had already happened. But Cora put Hanley in the 2 hole that night, because I think Benintendi had the night off, and I'm thinking, wow, he moved him up even further in the lineup. And I guess the plane landed in Boston, and he was informed right then at about 3:45 a.m. that he was being designated. And I saw something with Swihart saying, he was quoted as saying that was a long plane ride back to Boston, because he thought he was going to get the 3:45 a.m. conversation, and he's still on the team. And just to get into a Swihart real quick, apparently Dombrowski wants a top prospect for him, which is a pipe dream.
Not happening.
No.
That's not happening.
I mean, a top 15 prospect would be a good score, I would think, for him. For a catcher who still needs to develop, at least at that position. And so all that's going on, and he's not getting the value he wants. So by making this move, he can kind of keep Swihart, try to increase that value somewhat, and I don't know if he's going to catch, but you can DH him now. You can put him in left field if you want, and maybe have him take some reps at third. And they're saying he might still catch, but I mean, I don't, that sounds far-fetched. But anyway, but by designating Hanley, it buys more time for Swihart. But yeah, another thing too here is, and I haven't heard this talked about, this is just me, this is just how my mind works. I'm wondering if Dustin Pedroia had any say in this, like behind the scenes, him and Cora are pretty tight. They were ex teammates, and Cora kind of mentored him for that first year and a half. And Pedroia's basically the captain of the infield, and he gives all the signs, especially to Bogarts, and maybe he decided he likes Moreland better, at first base, and kind of put his 2 cents in.
I could see that. I mean, I think you make a valid point that, and we talked about it before about Pedroia being the leader and having more of a cachet than Hanley. It's very blunt. He has more World Series appearances, more playoff appearances than Hanley has in his whole career, let alone maybe in one season alone. But, I think the one thing that we need to remember is that Pedroia is a guy who he's not afraid to speak his mind. And prime example, we saw last year with the whole Machado situation. That wasn't me. That was them. He's going to call out his teammates. He's going to do it. He's going to do whatever he feels like he deems is right. So if it ever came out to be, let's say 15 years down the road, if Dustin Pedroia decided to write a book and he said, yeah, I'm the guy that got Hanley designated for assignment, would it shock me? No, not one bit, because he's a guy who will tell it like it is, and he'll worry about it down the road.
Yeah, and it could, and people seem to write books, when they get done with Boston, and, Francona did, and Ortiz. I really want Ben Cherington to write a book, so we know who really fucked up that 2015 season, with all those ridiculous Wade Miley, Justin Masterson signings and whatnot. But another thing, too, though, is with Hanley defensively at first base, he's an average to maybe even a slightly above average defender if the rest of the infield is solid. Unfortunately, right now, you have Rafael Devers, who, in my opinion, should probably get sent back down to the minors. That's not going to be a popular opinion, but if you got Pedroia back, you can put Nunez at third. You got Holt that can platoon with any of them. I just feel like you have the depth to send him down to get him a little bit more polished, but he makes a lot of errors throwing the ball to first. He just can't get the ball on line sometimes, and sometimes it ends up in the seats or up against the tarp. And Hanley is not the guy who's going to be able to dig that up like Mitch Moreland can. So unfortunately for Hanley, he had a young kid that he couldn't, he couldn't work too well with. And Moreland, we've seen him make some really miraculous saves over there. And so I think that kind of factored into it a lot too. And Nunez has been especially terrible, really, in a lot of areas. I mean, not only defensively, but running the bases. And some of that, I think has to fall on the third base coach as well. But just a lot of issues with the infield right now.
Well, I mean, let's not forget, too, with Devers, just to go back on that point, you got to remember, and I'm sure a lot of people maybe have forgotten, the third base prospect who actually was supposed to be maybe a guy who could help you guys this year, and Chavis, was suspended. I think it was 80 games for performance-enhancing drugs. So that option to, have Devers be sent down, now who's going to replace him? Nobody.
Yeah, you just the utility guys that we already have. I mean, I suppose you could probably try Zue Lin at that spot, but yeah, I mean, there's no obvious solutions, as you were saying. And that Chavis thing, we didn't cover that too much on the podcast, but I was the least shocked, when that news got broken, because he came out of nowhere. I mean, people were already talking about him being a bust, and then all of a sudden he's like a 400 hitter in the minors and killing it in the Arizona Fall League. And then when he wrote his statement and then invoked God in the statement, I believed him a lot less. Robinson Cano's statement felt more genuine to me, even though I thought he was dirty still. But But I was like, oh, he's guilty. If he's invoking God, that's what you do when you got nothing else in there. That's the last resort, and yeah. So was it Chris Colabello? Was that the Blue Jays outfielder that failed? Yeah, and he fell off the face of the earth after that. So,
and let's not forget, I think he was an independent player.
Colabello
and they picked him up. Yeah, he was playing independent baseball for some team in gosh knows where. The Blue Jays found him because he was raking, and we probably know why. And then he had a great 2 years, and then ever since he got caught, I think I don't know if he's retired from baseball, but I haven't heard from him again.
Yeah, so with Chavis specifically, I don't know. I mean, he's basically starting over, I would think, and
from the ground up.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because he probably, if he got out of the gates pretty good, could have been looking at a call up right now. Another guy we have, I'm not going to bother looking it up now, but Sam Travis, but I think he was injured. But I think he's more of a first baseman than a third baseman.
I know they've been trying to work on him to get at least a little bit more loft in his swing. The big thing, launch angles?
Yeah.
Trying to get more of the ball in the air because he's a guy who has great bat-to-ball skills and can pepper the ball anywhere, but he doesn't have a lot of power. So they've been trying to get him to be able to hit the ball more in the air, more doubles, maybe even home runs. And from what I've seen, it's helping him, but I just worry is that going to affect his average where he's going to go from, let's say, a 290 hitter to now he'll be a 240. But he'll have more home runs, but he'll make less contact.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't hit a single home run last year in a couple of call-ups, and people were talking about exactly that. He just wasn't really hitting for power. But then a lot of the beat writers would point out how he had reconstructive surgery on his knee after tearing his ACL, and maybe that played a role in it. But he has been a power hitter at just about every level, so I guess it just remains to be seen. He's played 29 games, so I think he might be playing again. But yeah, I don't know. And it's not that we really have a spot for him at this point anyway. I mean, Moreland's going to get the bulk of the time at first, and your outfield's, barring a Bradley trade anyway, the outfield is pretty full, and so there wouldn't be really a spot for him in left field. But getting back to Hanley, though, do you ever watch MLB Central in the morning?
Oh, I always do.
Okay, I didn't know if you were home at that hour. I work weird hours, and I'm typically home by 8 a.m. and I go back to work at about 3 p.m. But I try to catch the first hour of that, and they joke around on that show all the time. D-Row, I mean, how often is he ever serious about anything? And
if it's about Brian McCann, he's serious.
Okay. I haven't caught on to that, but
yeah, he loves Brian McCann's like his long lost brother or something.
Oh, okay.
He loves him.
Well, Robert Flores is the new guy that took over for Matt Vasgersian since he's on Sunday Night Baseball now, and I know he's a big Astros guy, but those guys are always joking around, and it's hardly ever serious, and and when they have, I think it was Smoltz on that morning. I mean, he's a jokester a bit, and the news came up on the screen that Hanley Ramirez and the Red Sox were parting ways, was how they worded it. And I just thought, I seriously considered for at least a half a second that they were just kidding. I'm like, no one saw that coming. And I just, the conspiracy theorist in me, just started, and I can't really come up with anything really, nothing, that could ever be substantiated. He had a wrist injury last season. Mm-hmm. Probably right about this time of year, and they said that he fell down the dugout steps and just kind of jammed his wrist a little. But there were unsubstantiated